The sun rose slowly over the village, painting the dusty paths and worn rooftops with a golden glow. Ancient baobab trees stood tall at the heart of the settlement, their gnarled branches twisting like the stories of old that the elders whispered to children under the shade. Every villager knew every neighbor's tale, every misdeed, every celebration, but there was one truth that lingered in silence, hidden beneath the dust and roots, waiting. Amina moved through the village quietly, her footsteps soft against the earth. Though she carried the weight of age in her hunched shoulders and silver-streaked hair, her eyes told of something far heavier, memories that had no place in the gossip of neighbors, memories she could not share. The villagers knew her as a kind woman, always ready with water for the thirsty traveler or food for a hungry child, yet something about her presence felt solemn, almost sacred, as if she walked with secrets that were older than the village itself. Under the baobab, villagers began to gather in small circles, leaning close to one another, voices low and cautious. "Do you remember the woman who arrived years ago?" one whispered. "They say she hides more than she lets show." Another shook his head, his eyes darting toward Amina's hut. "Some truths," the elder said, voice heavy with meaning, "are buried not to deceive, but to protect." Rumors fluttered like moths in the dusk, tales of a woman who had known the richest families of the city, who had fled with something, or someone, so precious that even the wind could not carry its story. Amid the murmur and shadow, Kofi moved with tireless purpose. Barefoot and sun-tanned, he carried the weight of chores, yet his eyes held a fire no hardship could quench. Villagers often laughed at him for dreaming beyond the limits of dusty roads and small fields, for believing that life held more than the soil beneath their feet. Yet in every village task he performed, in the way he guided children at play or helped elders carry heavy loads, Kofi showed wisdom beyond his years. There was dignity in the way he stood, a quiet command that made others follow even without being told. Amina watched him from her doorway, hands folded over a faded cloth. She had raised him with care, teaching him more than survival. She had taught him respect, resilience, and silence. Whenever outsiders approached, her eyes hardened, and her voice cut any question short. "He is mine to protect," she would say, the weight in her tone silencing even the boldest curiosity. Her love was unwavering but veiled, a quiet shield around the boy she had kept safe from both the village's eyes and the secrets of a world far larger than their own. Kofi, unaware of the depth of that secret, often looked at Amina with curiosity, wonder, and gratitude. Their bond was stronger than blood, yet built upon years of silence. He sensed her sorrow even as he felt her fierce protection, a paradox he could not yet understand. And so, in this village where every story was told, every whisper remembered, one truth remained buried, known only to the woman who carried it and the boy whose destiny it would one day shape. The elders spoke in low, careful tones as the evening fire flickered against the darkened sky. "Long ago," one began, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves, "a child of great wealth vanished on a night filled with fire and betrayal. The winds carried him far from his home, and no one has seen him since." Children shivered under the shadow of the baobab tree, eyes wide as the story drifted from one whisper to the next. Women shook their heads, muttering warnings of greed, envy, and the dangers of power. The tale traveled quickly across villages, not as rumor, but as living memory, a story both feared and honored, carried from mouth to ear like a sacred drumbeat. Inside her humble hut, Amina touched the small object hidden beneath her shawl, a necklace, delicate yet unmistakable, its golden clasp engraved with the family crest of a world far removed from their dusty village. Her fingers trembled, not from age, but from the weight of a secret kept too long. Nearby, Kofi ran his hand along the inside of his arm, where a faint mark shimmered under the afternoon sun, a mark no one had noticed before. He rubbed it absently, unaware that it was a sign tied to a life he had never known, a truth that whispered louder than any voice. The news came with the sound of distant horses and hurried feet. The wealthy family had not given up searching for their lost child. Excitement rippled through the village like sparks in dry grass. "Perhaps the child will return," one villager said, hope gleaming in their eyes. Another whispered, "Fate has remembered him at last." But Amina's face drained of color, her chest tightening with a fear she had long thought buried. Her past began to rise like a storm over the horizon, threatening to sweep away all she had built. Dust swirled along the village path, heralding the arrival of strangers from the city. They stepped out of polished carriages with the air of authority, their fine clothes and hurried movements stark against the rough textures of the village. Each carried a question, a weight of urgency that unsettled even the eldest of the villagers. The children paused in play, and the elders fell silent, sensing that this was no ordinary visit. Kofi watched them curiously, sensing the tension but not yet understanding its cause. Amina, however, retreated slightly into the shade of her doorway, her eyes sharp, her body taut. She whispered under her breath, "May the winds guide you, but may you not see what I fear you will." The strangers approached, speaking quickly, their voices clipped and polished. "We are here regarding the child taken long ago," one said, his eyes scanning every face, every corner of the village. "We come with questions and hope." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Kofi felt a stirring in his heart, a pull he could not name. And in that moment, under the watchful baobab and the shadow of an untold secret, the village held its breath, the past and present poised on the edge of revelation. The village, usually alive with the gentle rhythm of daily routines, felt a ripple of unease. Women paused over baskets of millet, and children lingered at the edge of the dusty paths, eyes wide with curiosity. The elders, seated beneath the ancient baobab tree, exchanged cautious glances. "This is no ordinary visit," murmured one, voice low as the evening wind. "They do not come seeking simple news. Something changes when the city's shadow falls upon us." The usual songs of laughter and market chatter were replaced by whispers, as if the very earth held its breath. Kofi walked among the villagers, feeling the shift before he understood it. Every word of the elder's story of the missing heir seemed to pull at something deep within him. His heart beat faster at the mere mention of the child who had vanished years ago. I feel like I know him," he murmured to himself, eyes tracing the horizon where the city representatives had arrived. That unknown connection sparked curiosity and a strange warmth, a pull toward a life he had never imagined. That night, as the village slept beneath the canopy of stars, his dreams carried him beyond the dusty paths, dreams of golden halls, laughter not born of struggle, and a destiny that felt like it was calling his name. The next day, subtle comparisons began to rise among the villagers. "Look at him," an elder whispered, pointing at Kofi. "See the way he carries himself. Does it not remind you of the stories of the lost child?" Others nodded, murmuring about his intelligence, his dignity, and the quiet command in his eyes. What had been hidden under the dust of poverty now became visible in small gestures and expressions. The whispers grew bolder, turning into questions and suggestions. The community, once mere observers, became storytellers and judges, piecing together the truth from memories, rumors, and instinct. Inside the hut, Amina's hands trembled as she folded a worn cloth. Every question asked by the villagers or the visitors felt like a hammer striking against the walls of her carefully guarded past. Her heart raced, and her usual calm, stoic strength faltered under the weight of fear. She could hear the old stories echoing louder in her mind, each one a reminder of what she had risked to protect Kofi. Every step of the strangers, every glance cast his way, made her stomach tighten as if a storm were gathering inside her chest. When Kofi approached the edge of the courtyard to speak to one of the city visitors, Amina's voice cut through sharply, heavy with warning. "Kofi, you do not speak to them. You do not follow strangers." Her tone carried the weight of both love and command. She stepped closer, eyes pleading yet firm. "It is not for your safety alone, but for all that you are, and all that you may one day become." Her hand rested briefly on his shoulder, a touch that was both gentle and binding. Kofi looked into her eyes, sensing the love behind the fear, but also feeling the walls rising between them. For the first time, he saw the bond they shared being tested, not by distance, but by the weight of secrets long held in silence. The village continued to watch, tension hanging like heavy smoke. Beneath their curiosity and growing speculation, the quiet dramas of love, loyalty, and fear unfolded. And in that space, where the past threatened to collide with the present, the seeds of a destiny yet revealed began to stir, carried on the whispers of elders and the pounding of a young boy's heart. The memory rose like smoke from a dying fire, curling in Amina's mind with a heat she had long buried. She saw the house of her youth, grand and gleaming, where laughter once filled the halls. The air was heavy with secrets, whispers of jealousy, and the weight of ambition that had no conscience. She remembered the night when betrayal slipped through the walls like a shadow, silent but deadly. Every sound, the cracking of timber, the shattering of glass, etched itself into her memory, warning her heart that trust was a fragile thing, easily broken in the world of the powerful. It had begun with a quarrel in the wealthy household she served, a disagreement that festered into malice. Eyes that once smiled now gleamed with envy. And when the night came, the enemies struck, silent as vipers, carrying torches that set the wooden beams aflame. "Run!" someone had shouted, but the voices were lost beneath the roar of fire and the screams of betrayal. Flames swallowed the halls of opulence, and in their glow, she saw the truth she could never speak aloud: wealth and power often invite ruin. Amid the chaos, she saw the child, small, helpless, eyes wide with fear. The fire reflected in his gaze, a mirror of innocence in a night consumed by greed and anger. The household guardians faltered, lost in their own fear, and the child vanished from every watchful eye. Fate, it seemed, had reached out to carry him from the world that would have destroyed him. That night, the story of the missing child was born, whispered across villages as both warning and wonder, a tale carried on the winds for generations. Amina did not hesitate. Her hands shook as she lifted the child into her arms, the heat of the fire against her back like the warning of ancestors. "I will keep you," she whispered, voice steady despite her pounding heart. Fear and instinct guided her feet along paths that no one else dared follow, into the forests and valleys unknown. Every shadow became a potential enemy, every sound a threat. Trust had become impossible in a world ruled by treachery, and yet her duty, to protect life, to honor the child, burned brighter than the flames that pursued them. In the quiet of a distant village, she became both mother and guardian, her life forever entwined with the child she now called her own. She fed him, taught him, protected him from the eyes of those who might wish him harm. Love grew between them, fierce and unyielding, yet it was born of a dangerous lie. Each day, she watched him sleep, fingers brushing a face that mirrored no one but the absent parents he would never remember. She whispered to herself in the hush of night, "Better a life built on truth hidden than one destroyed by the world's cruelty." The lie became their shield, and love, her constant companion, grew strong in the soil of secrecy. Every morning, Amina rose before the sun, the quiet weight of years pressing on her shoulders. She moved through the village with careful steps, tending her chores, greeting neighbors with measured warmth, yet always carrying a shadow unseen by others. Each laugh, each smile she offered Kofi, was tinged with a secret she could never speak aloud. The guilt walked beside her like an unseen companion, whispering in the silence of her nights. Kofi, now older and curious, began noticing the small inconsistencies that had once escaped him. "Amina," he asked one afternoon, picking at the hem of his worn tunic, "why do you never tell me stories of my parents? Even the small ones." Her hands froze mid-motion, sweeping the floor, and she lowered her eyes. "Some stories," she said softly, "are too heavy for young hearts to carry." But Kofi felt the gap widen inside him, a hollow where certainty had once lived. It was in the quiet of the storage room that he found it, the necklace, delicate and glinting, hidden beneath a bundle of cloth. He held it in his palms, the metal warm and heavy with a story he could not yet read. Where did this come from?" he murmured. Amina appeared behind him, her breath shallow, eyes full of storms. "It is nothing you need to know," she whispered, but the weight of unspoken truth pressed against every word. The necklace became a voice louder than any confession, carrying a history that demanded attention. Days passed, and Kofi's questions grew bolder. "Amina, why won't you tell me? Why hide things from me that I should know?" Each plea fell into the thick silence she kept. Her avoidance, once protective, now created chasms between them. He loved her still, deeply, but the trust they had shared began to fray like worn cloth. At night, Kofi's dreams twisted with doubt. He felt torn between love and betrayal, the warmth of Amina's care clashing with the shadow of her secrecy. "I do not know who I am," he said quietly one evening, gazing at the stars above the village. "And I fear the life I've lived may not be my own." Amina could only hold his hand, silent, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The village, too, became restless. Elders whispered beneath the baobabs, weighing the boy's destiny against the loyalty owed to the life that raised him. Some spoke of the city, of wealth and inheritance, urging Kofi to seek what was his by birthright. Others warned of betrayal disguised as opportunity, of roots that should never be abandoned. The river of opinion split the community, its currents tugging at the boy's heart from all sides. And in Kofi's soul, the forces clashed. Tradition and modernity, truth and protection, love and control, they warred inside him as surely as the world outside. Each day, he felt destiny brush against him like the wind over the baobabs, stirring questions he could not yet answer, and forcing him to confront the fragile balance between the life he knew and the life that awaited him. Amina watched silently, her heart breaking with every step he took toward the unknown, knowing that her love, though fierce, could not shield him forever. The village gathered in the center, the usual rhythm of drums and laughter absent. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Dust swirled lazily along the paths, catching the last rays of the sun, but no child ran to play, and no market stall cried its wares. The elders, who had seen countless seasons and told stories of both joy and sorrow, sat in silence, leaning on their carved staffs. A heavy sense of destiny filled the air, as if the ancestors themselves had descended to watch this day unfold. Kofi stood at the center, heart pounding, eyes darting to the polished strangers who moved among the villagers. Their clothes shone with the gleam of the city, their eyes sharp and searching. One stepped forward, bending slightly to study Kofi's posture, his gaze traveling from the tilt of his head to the careful weight of his shoulders. Another leaned closer, scrutinizing the curve of his hands and the lift of his chin. "This boy," murmured one softly, as if speaking to the spirits themselves. "Yes, the features match," said another. The certainty in their voices made whispers rise among the villagers, turning curiosity into an almost tangible acknowledgment. The gap between dusty village paths and towering city wealth began to shrink before Kofi's eyes. Then, as if the sun itself wished to speak, a mark revealed itself, a pale crescent on Kofi's arm, half hidden beneath his sleeve. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elders leaned closer, eyes wide. "It is the sign of lineage," one whispered, voice trembling like leaves in a storm. "A destiny not yet fulfilled." The mark could not be hidden by dust or time. It spoke louder than any words, and in its revelation, the villagers saw a truth long suspected but never confirmed. Amina's hand shook as Kofi moved aside, and the necklace she had hidden for years, silver and gold threaded with tiny charms, was brought forward. Sunlight caught the gems, scattering rainbows across the onlookers' faces. "This belonged to him," whispered a voice. "It carries his name, his right." The object, once silent and secret, now shone like justice itself, proof of identity, a relic of protection, a reminder of deception, and of love that had shielded him. All eyes turned to Amina. The silence that had always surrounded her was gone. She stood, stooped by years and burden, facing not only the village but the truth she had carried in her chest. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, I only wanted to keep him safe." Her voice broke, small against the weight of so many watching. Her secret, once a shield, now felt like a stone pressing down on her heart. Kofi staggered backward, mind reeling. His entire life, every lesson, every story, every hug, was built upon a foundation he now realized was shifting like sand in the wind. "All this time," he murmured, voice trembling. The faces he had trusted, the woman who raised him, the village that shaped him, they collided with the stranger's certainty. His identity, his past, and the future he had only dreamed of came crashing together, leaving him unsteady, like clay in a sudden storm, ready to be reshaped by forces greater than himself. The villagers murmured, and the city representatives exchanged knowing glances, but the storm inside Kofi raged louder than any voice around him. And for a single moment, the world fell silent again, as if waiting for the boy to decide how to walk in the truth that had finally stepped forward. Kofi's hands trembled as he held the necklace that had been hidden for so many years. The polished faces of the city representatives loomed nearby, their eyes sharp with certainty, while the villagers whispered in a hush that carried both awe and fear. He looked at Amina, the woman who had fed him, scolded him, and shaped him with her hands and heart, and yet, the truth between them felt like a chasm too wide to cross. I don't know where I belong," Kofi said, voice breaking. "Everything I thought I knew is gone." His gaze fell to the dust beneath his feet, then lifted toward the gleam of wealth and power the strangers represented. "Am I the child they were looking for? Or am I yours?" Amina's eyes, once calm and measured, glistened with tears that spilled down like rivers long held back. She stepped closer, hand hovering over his shoulder but not daring to touch. "Kofi," she whispered, voice soft but strong, "I carried you in my arms through storms, fire, and fear. I did not lie to harm you, I hid you to keep you alive. Every day, I prayed the world would forget our secret, but I could never forget you." The villagers shifted uneasily. Some frowned, unable to understand the complexity of her choice. Others bowed their heads, feeling the weight of a truth that demanded empathy. "She saved you," murmured an elder, voice trembling, "even if the cost was her own peace." Kofi's chest ached with the duality of his heart. The city called to him with promises of birthright, riches, and a destiny long written in dusty records and ancient marks. Yet here, in the simple shapes of mud huts, the smell of roasted maize, and the eyes of the woman who had loved him unconditionally, lay a life built from love, protection, and sacrifice. Every lesson, every bedtime story, every gentle scolding had woven a bond stronger than blood, yet now fragile in the light of truth. I feel torn," he admitted, voice shaking. "My heart wants to follow the life I was meant to live, but it also wants to stay with you, with the village that raised me." Amina lowered her head, letting her tears fall freely. "My son," she said, voice breaking, "I cannot claim what is yours, but I have given you the only life I could. I have loved you beyond all measure, even in silence. Now, you must decide what path your heart will walk." The villagers watched, silent witnesses to a story that had begun long before any of them were born. The elders exchanged solemn glances, understanding that sometimes truth arrives late, and that its power does not always bring peace. Kofi's mind swirled with questions, each one sharper than the last. Can love born in lies still be called pure? Can loyalty to those who shaped you outweigh the call of destiny? The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the village square. The dust swirled around Kofi's feet, and in that stillness, he realized that every choice bore weight, every truth carried cost, and every act of love, hidden or revealed, left a mark on the soul. And in that moment, Kofi understood the battlefield of his heart, where blood, loyalty, destiny, and love all fought silently, demanding a decision he was only beginning to comprehend. The village square lay still. The dust settled in the air, and even the wind seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Every eye turned toward Kofi. He stood alone, the weight of years, secrets, and expectations pressing upon his shoulders. The elders' faces, lined with wisdom and memory, were fixed upon him. Children clutched one another quietly, sensing the sacredness of the moment. Kofi's heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from the magnitude of the choice before him. "This is my moment," he whispered, voice steady yet full of awe. "I am both of this village and of the world I was born into. I cannot deny either." The promise of the city shimmered like gold in the distance. Polished representatives watched him with patience and power, their eyes waiting for a decision that would change everything. Wealth, influence, and a name long hidden called to him. Yet behind him, the smell of cooking fires, the laughter of children, and the quiet strength of the woman who raised him held him rooted. Kofi took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, the voices of ancestors murmuring in the rustle of the trees. "I accept who I am," he said aloud, holding the necklace that carried his heritage. "But I will not forget who raised me, who loved me, who shaped my heart and spirit." A murmur ran through the villagers. Some faces shone with pride, others with relief, as Kofi's words bridged worlds. The elders nodded knowingly, for they understood that true leadership comes not only from birthright but from wisdom, compassion, and loyalty. He stepped forward, hand extended toward the city representatives. "I will honor my lineage, yes. But I will also honor the soil, the people, and the village that made me who I am." The representatives exchanged glances, then bowed in respect. Then Kofi turned to the villagers. "Together, we will grow. Together, we will embrace progress without forgetting our roots. Wealth will serve our land, not replace it. And we will move forward, stronger, wiser, and united." The village erupted, not in chaos, but in celebration, voices mingling in song and cheer. Amina stood behind him, tears glinting like dew in the sun, a smile breaking through years of fear. "You have chosen well, my son," she said softly. "You have chosen both blood and heart." Kofi raised his hand, and the elders joined him. The sun cast its golden light over the square, bathing village and wealth alike in warmth. The two worlds, dust and gold, tradition and destiny, had found a bridge in one boy who understood that power meant little without love, and heritage meant nothing without loyalty. And in that quiet yet jubilant moment, the son of the soil lifted his people, not with force, but with heart, wisdom, and the promise of a future where the village would flourish and the past would be honored. The village square no longer buzzed with whispers or suspicion. Amina's face, lined with years of quiet suffering, was finally free from the weight of secrecy. The people of the village, who had watched her with curiosity and judgment for decades, now looked upon her with understanding. They saw the years of protection, the love woven into silence, the sacrifices born of fear and devotion. An elder stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "Amina, we see your heart. We see the burden you carried for another's child as if he were your own. Let there be no more blame." Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from shame, but from relief. She had lived with guilt like a shadow that never left her side, and now, for the first time, it felt lighter. The village offered quiet nods, smiles, and gentle touches, small acts that spoke louder than judgment ever could. Amina returned to her modest home, carrying the peace she had earned, yet the memory of the past lingered, like embers that never fully cool. In her quiet hours, she would sit beneath the baobab tree, recalling the night of fire and the child she saved, the weight of love intertwined with secrecy. Each memory taught her humility, resilience, and the complexity of choices made in fear. "Truth," she whispered to the wind, "cannot hide forever. It will rise like the sun and warm what it touches, but it can also burn." She thought of Kofi, now grown, standing as a bridge between worlds. His laughter in the village streets, his kindness to the children, the pride in his eyes when he looked at the people he loved, these were fruits of her imperfect but steadfast care. Love had grown, even through lies, guiding him toward the man he had become. "A child's path is never shaped by destiny alone," she murmured. "It is molded by hands that nurture, by hearts that protect, and by those who dare to carry burdens for others." At the edge of the village, Kofi stood on the ridge where the golden light of dawn met the dusty paths of home. Behind him lay the village that raised him. Before him stretched the wealth and promise he had inherited. The wind carried the scent of earth and fire, of sweat and hope. He no longer felt torn. He understood that he belonged to both worlds, yet he was fully himself, grounded in love, loyalty, and truth. He looked back at Amina, his eyes soft with gratitude and understanding. "Thank you," he whispered, not needing words for the lifetime of care and sacrifice. And so, the village witnessed the balance of two lives, one guided by destiny, the other by devotion, and they knew that the legacy of love and truth would endure long after their voices faded, whispered like a story carried on the wind.